Good morning, everyone. This is Darren at the Alaska Sea Life Center. It looks like we've got just a few more people signed on recently. If you could, right down at the bottom of your screen, look for the little button that says chat and open up the chat window and then just type in a quick message to let me know where you are and how many students you have and what grade levels. And I'm going to go ahead and show you just a little bit about the Alaska Sea Life Center while we're waiting for others to sign on here. All right. Well, first of all, here's where we are on a map. This is, of course, Alaska, and we are located on the Kenai Peninsula, which is in south central Alaska, just south of Anchorage. Anchorage is where most folks would fly into if you're coming to visit Alaska, and we're about 2.5 hours down the road from there, so we're right on the ocean. This is a photo of our town. This is Seward, Alaska, named after William H. Seward, who was the one that convinced our country to purchase Alaska from Russia back in 1867. It was originally known as Seward's Folly, but of course nowadays we know that was a pretty good deal to purchase Alaska from Russia. We've gotten a lot of resources from here, and it's a pretty amazing state. So if you haven't already had the chance to come visit us, put it on your list. It is a great place to come see, and if you have a chance to come see the Sea Life Center, this video will show you just some of the things that we have here at the Alaska Sea Life Center. So as we're waiting for anybody else to sign on here, it looks like we've got students from Kansas. Excellent. 2 classes today, 38 sixth graders in Kansas. Good to have you guys on today. Some of the animals that we have here at the Sea Life Center are the seals. We've got spotted seals, harbor seals, and ringed seals. We also have Steller sea lions. Those are the largest sea lions in the world, and they can get to be over 2,000 pounds. Welcome back, Spring Hill Elementary. I can see you there. We've also got diving seabirds, so you can see birds like puffins and guillemots and murres diving down among the fish like lingcod and rockfish, halibut and salmon we've got, and a lot of different tanks. And invertebrates like sea stars and anemones. These are all Alaskan species that we have here. We have a touch pool for our visitors to brave the cold water and put their hands in there to feel some of those invertebrate animals so that they can feel sea stars and anemones and urchins and crabs and cucumbers. We do classroom programs as well, and a lot of these distance learning connections like we're doing today. We also have a rescue program, so we rescue injured and stranded animals from all over Alaska. Some of them we can get back out into the wild if they're healthy enough to survive on their own, like this little harbor seal pup, headed back out into the ocean after being raised here at the Alaska Sea Life Center. And finally, we have a big team of scientists working here at the Alaska Sea Life Center, and their job is to try to find the answers to questions that no one knows the answers to yet. So those scientists use a lot of different tools and techniques to study the oceans of Alaska and the animals that live there. Sometimes they'll even join the animals in the ocean, put on scuba gear, and our scientific dive team can head right into the ocean and check out those animals first person. So if you haven't already, find the chat button at the bottom of your screen and go ahead and open up the chat window so you can send messages to everyone so we can all see who's out there. We've got at least students from Kansas and help me out, Fayetteville, Georgia, and then Fall River, Massachusetts, excellent, is with us as well. So my name is Darren, and I'm here at the Alaska Sea Life Center. This program today is part of Field Trip Zoom Zone, and that's a series of programs. There'll be a lot of different connections. We're doing another one on December 13th. 3 times that day, we'll be connecting to talk about skates that live here in Alaska, part of Shark Skates and Rays Week, the cartilaginous fishes. But today we're talking about animals called cephalopods. That includes the octopus and squid. And our octopus here at the Alaska Sea Life Center is back in a deep, dark corner. We'll take a peek back there in just a few minutes to see if Leo is out and about. He does spend a fair amount of time just resting back there, but we'll see if he's up and at 'em. And we'll also do a little squid dissection as part of our lesson here today. Throughout the course of the lesson, I'll have a few moments when I'll stop and have you guys submit some questions through the Q&A feature. That's down at the bottom of your screen as well. There's a separate button for Q&A, and those are specific questions that I can answer either live or I can send you a text answer as well. So that's separate from the chat feature. I'll also have a couple of poll questions for you where you'll see a little poll window pop up on your screen, and you can have your students submit their answers. You can just click on the buttons to select the answer that you choose for your poll, and then I can share the results. We'll see how everybody does. So I'm going to go ahead, and I see there's one answer or one question from the Q&A. Do I know how many species are in the ocean? I really don't, and no one does. What we do know is there's a lot we don't know about what's in the ocean. If you think of the ocean as a whole, most of it is totally dark. And so we can't just see it. We have to send instruments down there, actually travel down there ourselves. And what we have seen of the ocean floor is just about 5%. So think about this. If you have 20 students in a classroom, you would only be able to actually see one of those students. The other 19 students, you would just guess that they're there. You might have an estimate of approximately how tall they are, or maybe whether they're boys or girls, maybe an estimate of their age, but it's just all a guess. All of those other 19 kids out of 20 are just our best guess. So you could see one kid clearly, and the other 19 you'd just be sort of sketching a picture of from just your best guesses. That's how little we know of physically what's on the bottom of the ocean. And it's because we have to actually go there to see it, or we can use instrumentation devices to try to learn about the ocean floor. But as far as finding those species, there is a huge amount of space out there in the ocean. So there is a lot we haven't found yet. Almost every time researchers go down into the deeper parts of the ocean, especially, they're finding new species that scientists haven't discovered yet. So I don't even have an estimate of the numbers of species that are in the ocean. All right, I have two more questions. My favorite ocean animal is the octopus, so we're gonna get to see them today. That's an easy one to answer. And how old do squid live in the ocean? Some of them may only live to be about a year, 1.5 years for some of the smaller ones, but we'll explore the life of the giant Pacific octopus as well today, and they live to be up to 5 or 6 years old. So I'm gonna go ahead and dive in now with a poll question. If you have more questions that you wanna submit through the Q&A feature, I will have a few minutes to pause from time to time, and I'll look down at those for a while. So you can go ahead and submit those at any point if you'd like, or I'll have a few directed times to guide you to that spot too. But right now I'm gonna pull up a poll question. My first question is, what does the word cephalopod mean? So cephalopod is an unusual word, and you can go ahead and choose your answers there with your students. Submit your answers. This is the word cephalopod, and we'll talk about what it means in just a second, but I'm quizzing you first. What do you think it means? I've got some answers, or some suckers and some headfoots out there. I'll give you another maybe 15 or 20 seconds. All right. So we have mostly suckers and one group that chose headfoot. That's a very unusual meaning for a word, but indeed headfoot is correct because cephalo means head. And that's a part of a word that you don't really see very often. You may have heard of encephalitis. That's actually like a mosquito-borne disease that you can get from mosquitoes. It causes a swelling in your brain. So cephalo means head, or an electroencephalogram measures brain waves. Pod is foot, like on a tripod that has 3 legs or 3 feet. So we call these animals headfoots. Well, that is very strange. So that leads me right into the next poll question, and that relates to this diagram here. So go ahead and answer the question as best you can. Which of those letters do you think points to the head of the octopus? Is it A, is it B, or C? Which one points to the head of the octopus? Looks like I've got some of you leaning toward B here. Strange indeed. That's in the middle of the animal's body, but you think it's the head. All right. Everyone said B, and you are correct. That is indeed the head of the octopus. It's in the center of their body, which is the strange thing about these cephalopods is their head is in the middle of their body. So if I were a cephalopod, here's what I would look like. I would take my head and attach all my arms and legs to it right around my mouth. But the part of my body that I haven't drawn yet, well, there's my hair, ponytail. The part of my body that I haven't drawn yet is my body, and that still goes right here, just right past my mouth. Inside, there would be my heart. I have lungs, but if I were a cephalopod, I'd have gills. There's a stomach down in there, so the esophagus goes down through the head into the stomach. Then all the intestines are down in there as well. So the body of these animals is built unlike other animals, where most animals have the head at one end of the body. Cephalopods have the head in the middle. And this part out here is called the foot. Now, the reason why it's called a foot is because these are mollusks. So they are related to things like clams and snails and slugs. But unlike these animals, we don't think of these as terribly intelligent. These guys actually have a very big brain in that head. And it's in the center of their body, with their body attached to the back of their head, and their body is called the mantle. So that part of the octopus, the back end of its body, is the mantle. We've got the head, the mantle, and then the foot, which in the case of an octopus is all of these 8 arms. Okay, so as we explore the lives of these animals today, I'm going to do a little squid dissection. So here's my squid. This is called an opalescent squid, or sometimes just called a market squid. And we'll learn that there are some major differences between octopuses and squid, especially related to these arms and tentacles here. So we're going to learn the difference between arms and tentacles. Octopuses just have 8 arms. But if you look at a squid, there are 8 arms. And those are these little short ones here. There are 4 on that side and 4 more on this side. So that's a total of 8 of these shorter arms. But then they have these 2 much longer tentacles that stretch out. And those are very different from the arms. So an octopus does not have tentacles. It's correct to call them arms. So an octopus just has the 8 short arms like the squid have. But the squid have these longer tentacles, and these tentacles, if you look closely at them, let's zoom in here, we can see the tentacles are very smooth, where the arms have all the suckers all down the insides of them. The tentacles are very smooth all the way to the very tips until you get right out to the end, and this is where you find the suckers on the tentacles, is only at the very ends of them, because the tentacles are used for shooting out and capturing prey. So a squid can actually catch prey from pretty far away with these long tentacles, and they retract and pull the prey into their arms. But an octopus doesn't have that ability. It doesn't have those long tentacles. So if you imagine going fishing, you cast your line out there, you've got your hooks at the end of your line, you hook the fish and you reel it in. That's how the tentacles work. Well, imagine you're an octopus and you only have 8 arms, you don't have those tentacles. It's like going fishing without a fishing line. All you have is a net. Of course, you have to get much closer and sort of pounce on the fish or scoop it up somehow very quickly because you just have your little short net. And that's what an octopus has. So I'm going to show you a brief video of an octopus that we had years ago here at the Alaska Sea Life Center capturing a shrimp. So here's the shrimp. It's called a spot prawn, and this is a fairly large shrimp or prawn. It's about the size of your hand. Well, there's a very big giant Pacific octopus in the tank with it, and the octopus is going to pounce over the shrimp, and they have this web of skin that stretches between their 8 arms that they can use like a giant net. If we zoom in and look under the skin of the octopus here, you'll notice the shrimp is still swimming around inside there. It's trying to get away, but it can't. It's trapped by the skin of the octopus. So this is called a web, almost like Spider-Man throwing a web over. This allows them to see or to capture prey like shrimp that could actually swim away pretty quickly if they allowed them to. All right, now I'm going to open it up for some questions for a moment, because what I want to do is go back and check out Leo, our giant Pacific octopus, and it'll take me a minute to walk back there. So think of some questions that you have about cephalopods with what you've learned so far. As I switch cameras, I'll walk you back there into the cave to see if Leo is out and about. And go ahead and submit your questions using that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen there. And when I come back to the computer, then I'll take a look at those questions that you've submitted. So give me a moment here to just switch cameras. And we'll go back and pay Leo a visit. Back in the Octo Grotto, we call it. It'll be a little bit shaky as I change cameras here. Okay, there we go. Especially because it's still fairly early in the morning here. I'm extra shaky because all I've had is coffee so far. I'll do my best for you guys. Try not to make you nauseous. Okay, as we walk back here, you can see even in the light of the tank, it's actually fairly dark, and that's because octopuses typically like to live in dark spaces. So we have the tank very dimly lit for Leo, and it's a very rocky habitat. That's where octopuses like to live. And if we approach up here to the corner, here we can see Leo happy in his home. Right now you can see his mantle here. This is, again, his body. And you see he's got all these sort of spiky looking things sticking out of it. He can change the shape of his mantle and the texture, so he can make those spikes appear and disappear. Right now his eyes are up in the shadows, so it's very difficult to see him. I'll see if my camera can focus. There may not be enough light, but if you look really closely, there's Leo's eye right in the center of the screen. That little black strip is the opening of his pupil. And you can see he's just sort of slowly breathing. The way that they breathe is by opening up this opening of their mantle right here in the center. And it's just basically like a giant bag. And as they open the bag, it pulls water into the mantle that bathes the gills in fresh, clean water with lots of good oxygen in there. And then they breathe out through a small tube called the siphon. And I'll show you that on our squid as we do the dissection. And again, octopuses just have arms. So his arms are kind of coiled up around him. And Leo is packed up in the corner, which is what octopuses like to do. This animal is about 10 feet across from arm tip to arm tip. He weighs probably between 60 and 70 pounds, somewhere in there. Very large animal, but he could squeeze through a hole about that big around because his whole body is very soft, except for the part of his mouth called the beak. They have a hard beak for crunching through shells, and that is what they use to capture their prey. Now, as I walk back, I'm going to show you a little video of Leo recently when he was more active, so you can see how he moves around. And when I get back to my computer then, we'll see what kind of questions you guys have come up with through the Q&A feature. So there you can see Leo exploring his habitat a little bit more actively. And this was just a few days ago. You could see him swimming through the tank. And as he swims, he stretches his body out. And it's not because he's actively stretching his body out. It's because he's swimming by squeezing the water out from his mantle through that little tube, the siphon, and they swim by jet propulsion. So as they move through the water, their arms just sort of naturally trail behind them that way. All right, I have a question. Where does the octopus store that extra skin between its arms? From Kara. And it just sort of folds up. You can see that it's there, but it's very, very stretchy. And again, these animals, their bodies are very soft except for that hard beak that they have. And so that skin inside between the arms is very stretchy. So it sort of relaxes up and folds up between the arms just a little bit. It's always there, but when they stretch their arms apart, that skin stretches and can create this sort of giant billow effect. So it's always there. It's just sort of tightened up, kind of scrunched up in there. I've also got a question from Jennifer. Can octopi be a threat to humans? There are some octopuses out there that could be very dangerous. For example, the blue-ringed octopus has a very serious toxin, a poison that it can inject into a human that's actually strong enough to kill an adult human, even though the blue-ringed octopus is only about 10 centimeters across. Very small octopus. It has a very potent toxin that it can inject. So a lot of octopuses have some sort of toxin. It might be something that would paralyze their prey, immobilize their prey, because what they're gonna do is they're gonna go out hunting, they're gonna capture some prey, make it stop moving, whether they kill it or just put some venom in there to paralyze them, and then carry it back home, because if the octopus is just out and about, there's lots of predators out there that would love to eat them. So they have that venom to be able to immobilize their prey, and that's something that they can just add to their prey after they bite into them with that hard beak. And on a side note, the word octopi is actually not correct. It's a term that was created because it seems like things that end in US should be pluralized by adding an I, but it's not correct, because the word octopus comes originally from a Greek word, and the I is actually a Latin ending. So someone somewhere along the way just made a mistake and thought octopi would be correct, but it's actually octopuses. So for those of you who want to be linguistically accurate, it is octopuses. That is the correct plural of the word octopus. And now you know. How old is Leo? He's probably approximately 5 years old, but that's our best guess. We know that they can live to be over 5 years old here in Alaska, because we had one here at the Sea Life Center. In fact, the one that you saw catching the shrimp, he was here at the Sea Life Center for 5.5 years. What we don't know is how old he was when he got here, because there's a period of their lives where they are very small and just drifting around as plankton, and no one has really been able to figure out that part of their lives. For the giant Pacific octopus, we don't know how to raise them through that stretch of their lives. We don't know how long it takes until they settle down on the bottom and look like a little octopus. So our best guess is about 6 years, but it could be longer than that. Good question. Is the mantle fragile? Well, if you've ever had calamari, you know that it's kind of chewy. It's a fairly strong muscular organ. And so it may look like just a sac that contains everything, but it's actually a big muscle that can open to pull water into it and close to squeeze the water out through that siphon. So it's a pretty thick muscle, and you'll see that in the squid dissection in just a moment. And then finally, what is the most effective way for a predator to kill an octopus? The ones that I know of will actually bite right into the head, because that's where the brain is. And if they can crush that, then the octopus will die very quickly. And then they can consume it however they'd like, because an octopus can be kind of a complicated thing to swallow. For example, a stellar sea lion, which you can possibly see swimming around behind me, might like to eat an octopus, but they can't take bites of their food, so they have to sort of shake it around until it falls apart, especially with a big octopus. So what they would do is catch it and squeeze the head, bite into the head to crush it, and that would kill it. That would be the most effective way, other than just swallowing it outright. So a smaller octopus could be swallowed by a big fish with a large mouth. That would be another pretty effective way for an octopus to get eaten by a predator. And they are popular prey for lots of different animals. All right, well, let's go ahead and dive into our squid here. We've touched on a few different things. So I'm gonna pull up the document camera so we can see the squid. We'll look at the outside of the squid briefly again here. And you'll notice on the mantle, again, that's this whole body part here. On the mantle, we see all these spots. There's a lot of dark spots here on the top. On the underside, if I flip it over, there are some reddish colored spots, but it's pretty light all around. Those spots are related to how these animals change color, and we'll touch on that toward the end. They've also got these fins that help in steering. And if we look down here at the base of the mantle, right here under the head is the siphon. So this is a little tube that it's an open tube that stretches right into the mantle opening. So this is how they swim. Imagine blowing up a balloon. That's how they inflate their mantle. They pull water into it. And when they squeeze that water out through this little tiny tube, they can aim this tube around, and that's how they swim. By jet propulsion, they can swim very fast through the water. So that is how these animals propel themselves, is by filling their mantle with water and squeezing it out through this little tube, the siphon. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the beak here. So if I pull aside all the arms and tentacles, right down there at the center of them is where the mouth is. And the beak is down inside this little ball of muscle. So what I can do is just force my forceps under there and start to pull out that ball of muscle. And as I lift it out, you can see this long tube that's attached to it. That's the esophagus. And it's very, very skinny. The esophagus is very small. So these animals have to take very small bites of their food, because this esophagus actually goes through the center of their head, which means it goes right through the middle of their brain. Their brain is shaped like a donut that goes around their esophagus. So they have to take very tiny bites of their food to swallow it. The beak is what they use to just crunch into their prey. There are two halves to the beak. There's a top and a bottom. I'll go ahead and remove those parts if I can here. It's kind of stubborn. One second here, sorry. There we go. And right behind the beak is an organ called the radula, and I'm not finding the radula here. It's very difficult to see in these squid. It's really tiny, but I will show you a picture of what the radula looks like in lieu of finding the real deal here for you after we take a closer look at the beak here. So you can see the beak is a hard structure. And if we put it back together, the two halves form what looks just like a bird's beak. And they're very powerful, these structures. In a squid, they tend to be a little softer, or sharper, excuse me, because the prey of the squid are softer animals. But in an octopus, the beak is much harder because they tend to catch things that are down in the rocks. Oh, here's the radula. It's just stuck to the beak. So the radula is a very small organ, and I'll show you what it looks like under a microscope. So it looks like a little tongue, sort of. It's a very flexible organ that allows them to scrape the meat out of their prey in little pieces. So let's look at how that radula works. Just through a microscope. This is a picture, close-up picture of a radula from a squid, a very large squid. And they've got little tiny hooks all over that radula. So, you know, if you've ever been licked by a cat, you know how their tongue is kind of rough. Well, this tongue would be so rough that it would actually shred the flesh right off of your body. So you wouldn't want your cat to lick you if it had a radula, for sure. But that's how they take small bites of their prey. They catch it whole, and then they just sort of scrape little tiny bits off at a time and swallow those pieces through the esophagus, which is, again, very tiny and leads right through the center of their brain. All right, once their food travels through the esophagus, it's going to head down into the mantle where the stomach is. So we're going to go ahead and open up the mantle of our squid here and take a look inside. So I'm just going to cut right through this. It cuts fairly easily. Again, if you've ever had calamari, you were eating the arms and tentacles and the mantle. These are all just muscular tissues. So you can see the muscle is pretty thick. It's at least an 1/8 inch thick on this particular squid, and it's firm. It's a pretty strong muscle. These are very muscular animals, the cephalopods. All right, now that we've got it open, we can see a few more of the features of this animal's body. First of all, we notice the ink sac, which is right here, and it opens up right in front of the siphon. So as this animal is trying to escape a predator, again, they fill their mantle with water and squirt that water out through this little siphon here. As they're doing that, if they want to, they can release a little bit of ink right into that siphon, and it just comes out with the water. I'm going to go ahead and remove the ink sac, separate it from the body here, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. Being very stubborn, almost as stubborn as the beak was. There we go. All right. Now I can see that this particular squid is a female. She has these large white organs here in the center of her body. Those are what produce the eggs. So these are called the egg glands, or the nidamental glands. The eggs are out here at the tip of the mantle, and they fill this whole cavity here at the end. If it was a male squid, those 2 egg glands would be absent, so they wouldn't have those at all. And up here would just be sort of a whitish liquid. That's how we would tell that it was a male. So that's how I can see that it was a female. It had these 2 egg glands and the eggs up here. It was a pretty mature female. Now, as I look down inside, I can see the gills. So once again, the way that they breathe is just by pulling water straight into the opening of the mantle, and there are the gills right there. So as that water enters the mantle, it goes right over these sort of free floating gills. And at the end of each gill is a heart. So if we zoom in, we may be able to see the hearts. They actually have 3 total. I'm going to try to focus that a little bit better. And right down inside there, you can see right here, there is a pale yellow spot. Right there, that's at the end of the gill. That is one of the branchial hearts, the gill hearts. And on the other side, at the end of this gill, there is another one right here. It's a little tougher to see. These little pale yellow circles. So those are the 2 branchial hearts. And then the third heart, the systemic heart, is right here in the center. And that pumps the blood through the rest of the body. So squid have 3 hearts. And 1 heart pumps the blood through each gill. Sorry, 2 hearts for the gills. So there are separate hearts to pump the blood through the gills, and then there's a third heart to pump the blood through the rest of the body, which delivers oxygen very efficiently through the body of the squid. All right, now we haven't really looked at other types of cephalopods yet. So I'm going to stop for a second and toss out another poll question. This one is going to have to do with the eyes of cephalopods. So I've got another picture for you guys to see. And I want you to take a stab here. Which one of those eyes pictured is not a cephalopod eye? All right, it looks like we've got most of the responses in. I've got some A, some B, and some C. It looks like we're pretty heavy on C. That's very interesting to me. That's what the last group thought too, is that C was not a cephalopod eye, but indeed that is a cephalopod eye. And let me show you the answer here. So this one you might have been able to see. It looks just like Leo's eye. That's a giant Pacific octopus. Here we have a cuttlefish. Their pupil is shaped almost like a W. It's this curly line that goes through the side of their eye. This is a squid eye that is mostly round, but very, very large. And it does look a lot like a fish eye. Many fish have eyes like this, but they wouldn't have eyes this big compared to the size of their body. And I'll show you exactly how big the squid's eye is compared to the size of its head in just a moment here. This last one is not a cephalopod. It is actually the eye of an Alaska skate. So this is a skate. It's similar to something like a stingray. It's a cartilaginous fish, so related to sharks and skates, or sharks and rays. And we're going to be doing another one of these field trip Zoom zone programs on December 13th to talk about skates here in Alaska. So you can learn more about these guys December 13th through this same type of connection that we'll be doing with field trip Zoom again. But it is an Alaska skate, and their eye is very unusual. I couldn't begin to tell you why it has that little curtain over it, but it's a fascinating eye on the skates. Okay, apologize, I keep pressing my button and it is not responding to me. There we go. I think my remote batteries are dying. And we're back. Okay, so back to our squid here. So there are 4 main types of cephalopods. Those are the octopus, the squid, the cuttlefish, and we saw a glimpse into the cuttlefish eye. And the 4th type of cephalopod is the nautilus. And you can see the nautilus is very different from the others. It has this huge shell on the outside of its body. Remember I said these are mollusks. They're related to things like snails. But what's unusual about this shell is it has a bunch of little chambers inside. The nautilus can fill those chambers with gas so that it can swim up in the water more easily, or it can fill them with water so it can sink down more easily. So the nautilus is capable of swimming, even though it's got this giant shell on the outside of its body. It's capable of swimming. Well, some of the other cephalopods, the squid and cuttlefish, do have shells. It's just they're on the inside of their bodies. So we're going to look next at the internal shell of our squid here. I'm going to fold up the arms and tentacles and the head. And right down here at the base of the mantle, I'm just going to grab this little pointy thing that sticks out and just pull. And it slides straight out. This is called the pen of the squid. And you can see it's basically just this clear thing. It looks like plastic almost. And it's made of chitin, the same stuff that insect exoskeletons are made of, like the outside of a beetle where it feels kind of hard. That's what this is made of. And since I have a pen, I might as well give it a shot here to do a little writing with my ink. So let me bring the ink sac back down. I'm going to try to break it open just with my tweezers here. There you can see that black ink coming out. There's not a whole lot in this particular squid's ink sac, probably because it used some of it recently. But you can use that ink to write with. There are artists out there that use squid and octopus ink to create artwork. And it ends up with an interesting tone to it. If you've ever heard of sepia tone, like old photographs, that word, sepia, is related to a lot of these cephalopods. So that's where that color of ink comes from, is early forms of ink, such as cephalopod ink. All right, it looks like we've got one question out there in the Q&A box, so let me pause for just a second here. The difference between an octopus and a squid. So one difference is that an octopus does not have these 2 long tentacles. An octopus only has 8 arms. But another difference is that pen. An octopus does not have any kind of internal shell. Cuttlefish does have an internal shell, and I can show you one of those. You may have seen them in pet stores before because you can buy them to put them into a pet bird cage. This is called a cuttlebone, and it's not a bone at all. It's actually a shell, but it's from the inside of the cuttlefish. So this would be up in the top part of the mantle of a cuttlefish, the same region where we just found the pen of our squid, but you can see there's a big difference between those two. The squid is a much more streamlined animal. This cuttlefish tends to be a lot more sort of chunky and stocky looking, and that's partly because of that internal shell. But an octopus does not have any internal shell at all. All right, and if you would like, we've got just about 11 minutes left before we need to sign off. So if you have other questions, now would be a good time to start thinking of them and go ahead and submit them. And at the end, I will spend a few more minutes answering some of the last questions that we have before we need to sign off at 1 o'clock Eastern time. All right, the next thing I'm going to show you is how these animals change color. And I'm going to go ahead and peel the organs right off of the mantle. And then if I take that mantle and turn it over, we'll look at the outside of the mantle again. And you can see there are lots of little colored spots. Those spots are called chromatophores. And this is how these animals are able to change color, is with these little colored spots. So this particular type of squid, you can see, has some little red spots and some little black spots. When it was alive, it actually would have shown a lot more colors. But after they die, some of these colors fade, and there are also little sort of mirror-like organs in the skin that help reflect even more colors. But if we look just at the little colored spots that we can see here, and I start to rub my finger in an area, what you'll see is those spots start to get darker. And it's because they're getting bigger. I'm sort of stretching them open. The color is, it's almost like it's trapped inside there. And the way that these animals change color is just by opening and closing those little spots. So you can see there's a lot of red in there that we couldn't see before. But now that I've stretched those spots open, you can see that reddish color in the mantle. So with all these thousands of chromatophores all over their skin, as they open and close different spots, they can change color. And I'm going to show you a brief video of a cuttlefish doing just that. So you can see how quickly these animals can change the color of their body. And again, it's just by opening and closing those little spots, those little chromatophores. So these are males fighting. They can communicate by changing their color, but it's very, very quick that they can change their color. They can use it to confuse prey, and watch what happens when this cuttlefish catches its prey there. It changes its body entirely. It made its skin very spiky and dangerous looking and had a very aggressive color pattern. Presumably, that's to avoid getting eaten by another predator while it's sitting there struggling with its prey. And of course, the ability to change their color and skin texture is another way, a great way for them to hide. This is an octopus hiding just in plain sight out on a rock. This is a tropical octopus, fairly shallow water. But watch the rock here. The octopus just appears magically out of nowhere. Of course, as the person gets too close, then the octopus decides to jet away. As it jets away, it releases some ink. When it realizes that this large animal is still pursuing it, it stops and tries to, sort of like the cuttlefish, produce a very aggressive color pattern. And that was its last attempt. The person did not attack the octopus. That was an octopus researcher named Roger Hanlon that shot that video. He's just showing the abilities of these animals. And most remarkably, going backwards, you can see that octopus just completely disappear into its surroundings. So they're very good at camouflage, but that's just one of their abilities. If we go back to the squid here, the eyes of these animals are unique and they're very impressive. So remember what part of the squid we're looking at here. This is the whole head right there in the center of the body, and all of it is eye. If I remove a little bit of tissue here, you can see the eye a little bit better. But the whole eye covers the entire side of this animal's head. So you imagine if our eyes were the whole side of our face, that's how big their eyes are compared to the size of their body. They are the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. And these are fairly cloudy, unfortunately. They're not showing up very well, but that whole structure there is all eye, the whole side of their face. What we don't know is exactly how they see color or if they see color. It seems rather weird that an animal that can change color to communicate and camouflage itself wouldn't be able to see color, but they don't appear to have the same kind of color receptors that we do. So scientists are still trying to figure that out. It's possible that their skin perceives the color somehow. There's also been some recent research that suggests the unusual shape of those pupils that we saw of their eyes might help to bend the light a certain way so that the edges of that bent light can come into focus in different colors, so they can change the shape of their pupil to see different colors. But that gets really complicated, and I didn't do that well in that part of physics in college, so I'm not going to try to go there. I will spend the last couple of minutes, though, answering some of your questions. So let's take a look at the Q&A here, and you can see back into the dark corner there, the octogrotto again, just in case Leo pokes his head out. How long can they grow? A giant Pacific octopus could grow to be over 200 pounds. There have been some recorded that big, and they would be up to 12 to 15 feet across. But squid, giant squid, their body, just the mantle, could be 12, maybe 15 feet long, and then their tentacles could be another 30 feet long beyond that. So a giant squid can be up to about 50 feet, we think, but we don't know a lot about the giant squid. What do they eat? From Allison, that's a great question. Octopuses tend to eat things like shrimp and crabs and clams because they live down on the bottom, and they're able to hunt those animals more easily down in the rocks creeping around. But squid, because they have those long tentacles, they're able to capture prey right up out of the water. So squid will eat other squid, krill that would be swimming through the water, fish, and some possibly shrimp if those shrimp are out and about too. Cuttlefish, same kind of thing. You saw the cuttlefish eating a flatfish down at the bottom. The cuttlefish are able to capture prey from a distance with their long tentacles like the squid have, but they're going to tend to hunt down closer to the bottom where the squid might be out and about in the main water column. So fish, shrimp, krill, and then for octopus, it would definitely be more like crabs and shrimp and clams they would pull up off the bottom. All right, here's those stellar sea lions again in the dark back there. Do squids tend to live in warmer or colder climates? Great question. Just about everywhere. Cephalopods are successful almost everywhere in the ocean, just about all depths and all areas of the ocean. So I don't know if they're more or less common in certain areas. Squid do tend to live in dark places, so there's probably a lot more down in the deep ocean, but they could be in warmer climates and cooler climates, just down deeper. The biggest squid species is between the giant squid and the colossal squid, but we don't know that much about them. Up until 2004, no one had ever even taken a picture of a live giant squid, and I don't know yet if they've found a colossal squid alive. So the difference is the giant squid is much longer, the colossal squid is much fatter, but they're both maybe equally heavy. So the longest squid species that we're aware of is the giant squid, but the colossal squid could be heavier than that, maybe bigger all around, but they're both very large squid species. And finally, how do they reproduce? We've also got how many squid species are there? I can't even begin to guess. There are a lot of them out there because these animals are so successful. They're all around the ocean. And let me wrap it up here for just the last couple minutes with how do they reproduce, because I've got a couple of fun videos that I can share of octopuses reproducing. So an octopus lays its eggs inside of its den, and the mother octopus will spend the whole rest of her life just caring for the eggs. And this giant Pacific octopus will have anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 eggs. You can see her caring for the eggs by brushing over them, blowing water over them, keeping them clean. When those eggs hatch, that's the end of the mother's life. And here in Alaska, she'll spend a whole year just taking care of those eggs until they hatch, and all those little tens of thousands of babies will hatch out. They're about the size of a piece of rice, and this is what they look like when they first come out of the egg. These are just a few days old. These are octopus paralarvae, and this is the stage of their life that we don't understand very well. We don't know how long they're like this before they settle down to the bottom and look like little octopuses. So these little guys are the precious, fragile ones that come out, and only a couple of them will survive to become adults. All right, well, we do need to wrap it up because there is another group using the room here shortly. But I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and thanks for being part of Field Trip Zoom Zone, and hopefully you can catch up with other connections in the future. And if you get the chance to visit Alaska in person, come on by, pay us a visit. It was great hanging out with you guys today, and look forward to seeing you again in the future. Take care. Bye-bye.